So I was asked recently about creating slideshows or different types of animations inside of Photoshop, and more specifically Photoshop CS3 Extended, because it employs a new animation panel that allows you to create interpolated animation, meaning you're able to create much more smoother animations and transitions depending on what type of things you're creating. In this case, we're going to create kind of a slideshow with some simple transitions in between the photos, some simple dissolves. And then we're going to be doing it through the use of keyframes, all within the new timeline in Photoshop. So here I have 4 photos that were taken by a friend of mine, Vincent Versace. He's an outdoor photographer, and these were taken in Burma. These are amazing shots here. And we're going to create just a simple slideshow. I just want to have one show kind of fade in. It stays on screen for a few seconds, and then it fades or dissolves to the next photo. We're going to do all that right inside Photoshop here. So first, I need to get all of these images into one file. So I'm just going to make this one my base file. I'm just going to hold down the Shift key and drag and drop these other photos. I'm going to close them as I drag them. I no longer need the open file. Hold down the Shift key, drag and drop. Holding down the Shift key pops it right in the center of your document. And we'll hit save. Let's drag and drop that one. Boom, there we are. All right, so now all the photos are in one file. I need to go and unlock this background layer, so it'll be part of my animation. So with all the files in place on one file, let's go into the window menu and choose animation. And here's our new timeline animation panel. A lot different from the frame by frame animation panel that was in the previous version, and it gives us a lot more creative freedom. So, want to transition each photo as it passes through the timeline? Well, let's look at a couple things. I have 4 photos, and I want to have them on screen for, let's say, 3 seconds. Just kind of a quick thing. Maybe this is going to be an opening slideshow for a website or something like that. Who knows? So if I want each photo to be about 3 seconds, and I got 4 photos, obviously my timeline needs to be about 12 seconds long. Well, right now by default, it's 10 seconds. So to change that, if I go into the flyout menu here in my timeline panel and go to document settings, and we'll just change this to 12 seconds. And it changes in my timeline. All right, so now when I transition each of the photos, well, first thing I'm going to do is actually just shorten each layer. This green bar represents that image being visible throughout the entire length of the timeline. But you can actually grab the ends of these, it turns into a double arrow, and shorten that time. So now, if I drag it over, that photo will only appear visible when it gets to the dark green area of that layer. So if I know I want it for about 3 seconds, I'm going to put this at about the 9-second mark, and as I drag through, it's showing this photo underneath until it gets to that point, and then it does a cut. Well, let's do the other photos. I'm going to grab the ends of this one, and let's take this to about the 6-second mark, drop this one around the 3-second mark. So now as I drag through the timeline, you can see as it gets to a certain point, cuts to the next photo, cuts to the next one, then cuts to the next one. Well, that's good and all, but I don't want it to cut. I actually want it to just kind of do a smooth transition into that. And I want it to actually transition in from the very beginning. So let's go move with my playhead at the very beginning. I'm going to select that bottommost layer, and I'm going to create a new layer beneath it. By holding down my Command or Control key, click a new layer, new blank layer at the very bottom. I'm going to fill that with black, and since black is set as my foreground color, I'm just going to press Option Delete, and there we have that. So now let's highlight that first layer. I'm going to twirl down to reveal the animated properties. So these are the different properties that I can animate over the course of this timeline. Well, we're going to be animating the opacity. So with my playhead in the very beginning spot, I'm going to click to set a keyframe for the opacity. And that's what that little stopwatch icon is for. Well, I want it to start at 0 opacity. So I'm going to go up here into the opacity scrubby slider and drag this to 0. Then we'll drag my playhead over to about the 0.5-second mark, which is about 15 frames. And I'm going to go back in here and drag this opacity back up to 100. But watch what happens in the timeline when I release my mouse. Boom, adds another keyframe in there. So between these 2 keyframes, from this keyframe, it goes from 0% opacity. And then when it gets to this keyframe, it goes to 100% opacity. So now as I manually drag this through, the picture fades in. It's showing that background black layer that I created. Fades in the picture, and then shows the picture until it gets to the next photo. Well, instead of having to reapply these exact same keyframes to each layer, and all I'm going to do is select both layers, and their selection is indicated by the yellow fill there. I'm just going to go and click my control key, or I'll hold down my control key, or right click right on that keyframe and go right here to copy keyframes. Then let's highlight the layer just above it and move the timeline to about right at the first frame of that layer. And then go into the flyout menu here in the animation panel and choose paste keyframes. And twirl that up and reveal that. There's those pasted keyframes. When it gets to the picture, it fades in. So let's do it to the next two. Put the playhead right about there. Go up in here, paste keyframes. Again, let's do it with that last layer. Flyout menu, paste keyframes. And now it fades in. Now, this green bar at the very top, as you see, it's getting kind of broken up as I drag through. What it's doing is rendering the frames of my animation. And by scrubbing through it, it actually speeds up the process. But when you hit the space bar, it'll actually play through. And it will play through kind of jagged and rough as it's rendering these frames. But you can see when it gets past a certain point, the green bar is solid, meaning it's fully rendered. So when it renders those frames as it passes through, you can kind of get a subtle idea of how the transitions are going to play. Going through, it's rendering those frames, and then when it goes back, it's going to automatically loop and play it in full motion. There you see, it's going through, fade to the next picture, then it fades again, and then it fades one last time. So that's creating a simple slideshow. It's just going through the timeline, and it's animating that opacity as it travels over that half second, right over there, using keyframes and interpolating that change with the new animation features. Now, of course, this is just a small part of the powerful things you can really accomplish using these new animation features. In fact, I've got a new DVD coming out soon called Photoshop in Motion. It's all about creating interesting motion graphics, animated illustrations using these new animation features in Photoshop CS3 Extended. So, give it a try yourself, see what kind of different types of scenarios you can come up with, and most importantly, have fun with it. We'll see you next time.